down, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
If you're watching this video, then I must apologize. I have unfortunately delayed a certain episode in the Legiondary Marathon. You're probably watching this in 2025 as a bonus episode as an apology for delaying the marathon. And for that, I am truly sorry. But at least I got to talk about this wonderful figure. See, one of the best designs from Dark of the Moon would have to be Sentinel Prime. They just cooked with that. The flowing cape, the mechanical detail on the torso, it's just to die for. Brought to life wonderfully by the late Leonard Nimoy. However, it's hard to determine what the best toy of him is. Most of them make a lot of sacrifices to make the design work. It's deceptively simple. It seems simple, but it really isn't. However, what if I were to tell you, they already cooked earlier. They already did it great. All you have to do is look back to Cyberverse. For me, when it comes to Legends, I really like when figures feel massive, but they're actually tiny. That kind of dichotomy between the scale it's going for and the actual size, it's just something adorable to me. And it's something Sentinel Prime has in spades. I mean, this is a pretty big vehicle, and you can kind of see all the tiny details. But on a figure this bloody small, even by Dark of the Moon Cyberverse standards, yeah, it really comes across as cute. In some ways, it's really detailed, but in others, it's very minimalist. It's kind of funny in a lot of ways. The detail is anything but. It's panel lined to the absolute nines. You got grills all over the top, grills all over the side, and some lovely paint applications. The paint apps on the side are actually done really well. They clearly prioritize this with the logos and the Autobot symbol, ha ha ha. Probably for the accuracy to the actual vehicle. And there is some color matching going on as well. You've got the black over here that helps bring up the stripe. The black on the bottom bits to make this feel very different from the red at the top. You do get a bit of angling here thanks to the paneling, but it's fine. It's fine. Would have looked weird in robot mode if they hadn't done that. Hinged wheels, which means he rolls very, very well. Not on this really hard surface, but still rolls really well. Back's pretty clean as well. You can see they've repurposed the ankle struts as nice pistons. So this is my childhood copy, so unfortunately one of them is snapped off. Yeah, I was a dumb kid. I did dumb shit. It's rather unfortunate. And one thing that he does have over the Voyager version is that you can rotate the hose instead of just moving it up and down. There is no up and down motion, but I think side to side is a bit more important. I get why the Voyager did what it did. It had a very specific budget that was very limited in what it could do, whereas this does more creative things with the weapons. I actually think the way it stores the weapons is a lot better to the Voyager. The sword stores on the bottom instead of being parts forming pieces from the legs, and I think that is a better way of doing it. I don't mind the parts forming sword, but that sword is way better in general. Now, unfortunately, there is one part that is majorly underdone, and it is the window section. There is no paint up front whatsoever, and it's really unfortunate because the rest of it, especially from the side, looks stunning. It's just the front is missing a lot. They did actually release a version of it. I think it was called the Dark Side Sentinel Prime, where they painted a lot of the front section, although I think that was more for robot mode than vehicle mode. But then that featured a lot of sacrifices in the rest of the vehicle, so I do kind of get it. Plus, this shade of red just works way better on this version. In fact, I would honestly say that I prefer the colors on this version of Sentinel Prime more than the Studio Series version. Now, granted, they are going for very different things. The way that Studio Series works is that they paint all of the red instead of using red plastic. This is to keep some of the budget on the sprues down, but also give it a more premium feel in the long run. It's a very risky thing to do, and I think this is one of the few figures that actually pulls it off. But in general, I just kind of prefer the shade of red here. I also kind of prefer the engineering on this one overall, simply because it uses the real parts here. Not that I dislike the engineering here, and not that I hate faux parts, but I think this section here is just so clever. When use of real parts is cleverer than the use of fake parts, then yeah, I am going to prefer that. But to be fair, maybe that's the nostalgia talking. I have had this figure since I was a kid. It was one of the last figures I got before I sort of temporarily quit collecting, so it's really meant a lot to me over the years. But the Studio Series 1 is also good, even if it does have slightly less functionality in the hose section. Well, really, it's a side grade with functionality, but I prefer that functionality. And no, I don't think they could have just upscaled this to this. This is a tailor-made transformation for the Legend scale, and this would have needed something completely new. Just judge things as their own things, not as, oh, it should have been upscaled or downscaled from that. Make scale-appropriate transformations, and I do think Studio Series did with that. Regardless, it is a lovely vehicle mode. It's nice, it's compact, the panels all work really well. From a lot of angles, you can barely tell it transforms. It just kind of looks like a Matchbox car or something. Or a Matchbox fire engine, you get what I mean. It's filled with lovely details right down to the tiny hose at the front. It incorporates the gimmicks immaculately. What can I say? This is probably one of the best Dark of the Moon Cyberverse vehicles we've gotten back in the day. Anywho, size-wise, he is 2.9 centimeters, by 9.8 centimeters, by 3.8 centimeters, including the little hose at the top there. And for a size comparison, here he is next to a standard Legion figure. I have no idea where Jazz went, so I'm just going to use Prowl for these last two that I forgot to film earlier.
Oh, look, there he is. He fell into the bag with the Kabaya kids, god damn it.
A standard core class figure showing that even in comparison to that, he is very small. A standard modern Micromaster, a standard modern Minicon, a not so standard Lego minifigure, and Crumbs. Transformation is very simple and very lovely. It's the kind of thing you just want to flip back and forth. It's a little bit more difficult going into vehicle mode, but at least into robot mode, it's very nice. First thing you want to do is remove the sword from the bottom. Just weapon storage, not parts forming. Actually pegs in here and here, so it's got nice levels of stability, regardless of which way you put it. Then you open up the cape, and that will allow you to remove the top section. That's weapon parts forming, and I think it's way more clever than what the SS version did. That's the one part I really wish the Studio Series version had taken. The one part that could have been superimposed onto that. Everything else, I understand why they did what they did. Anywho, we'll just bring these up and get this whole section out of the way, because it does make a lot of this easier. You want to separate the arms from the legs. That will allow you to separate the legs. Bring out the feet like so, and then rotate this whole section around so they're facing forwards. You then separate this section just a little bit and start to bring the arms out as you also bring them up, which then brings these right into place as they would be on the screen model. Great use of real parts, but I see why they didn't do that on larger figures. It only really works on a Legends figure like this. You then rotate the arms into place and bring down everything else, just like so. And you can see why they painted that little edge there, because otherwise the panels here would have been very jagged. Bring the head up from the back and it sits in place there. Use the double hinge to bring up the backpack and bring these down and you're done. Very lovely representation. Captures the character very well in very few steps. This is Dark of the Moon Cyberverse royalty. And in robot mode, he is just lovely. Like, goddamn, Sentinel Prime just looks fantastic from pretty much most angles. Admittedly, the head sculpt is a little bit simplified, but the sculpting is all there. It looks exactly like the character and exactly like Leonard Nimoy. The torso is pretty on point. You're missing a lot of the color on the front, which of course the Dark Side version did fix years later, but it's mostly there and everything looks pretty damn good. The only real downside is that the belly button sticks out a little bit because of the sword storage and of course the wheels at the front, but I mean, Legends figure, what you gonna do? It's just a fantastic design in the torso, and everything else works really well too. The legs aren't really that kibbly. They're appropriately long and appropriately slender. The feet do stick out a little bit due to the transformation, but again, Legends figure, what you gonna do? And the arms are basically perfect with their lovely shoulder pads and awesome forearms. Everything here just works. They even got the cape at the back perfectly shaped. Like, that's just the cape. They've made no sacrifices the way it is. The only thing that would really make it perfect if it was segmented. But honestly, in plastic form, it's not really feasible anyway. Most of the versions I've seen have just made parts forming pieces to make it segmented, which I've never really thought was that necessary anyway. Just from head to toe, this is a bloody brilliant figure. Could use some more paint on the forearms, I guess, but I mean, it's still fine. You've got the lovely silver trim around the edges here and awesome silver on the shins. Even the articulation works pretty well. You don't have anything on the head, but it's fine for the size. Forward swivels here and ball joints here as well, so you can still get the full out and still most of the range with everything here. Maybe not quite this way, but it's fine. No bicep swivel, unfortunately, and the elbow is a little bit limited, but with everything that you have here, it still works reasonably well. And then just ball joint and ball joints. So really slightly limited articulation, but it's still damn good. Sometimes he has a bit of trouble standing, but this is purely my copy because I snapped off the heel spur. Everything else works really, really well. Even the weapons work great. You've got the sword that just works right out the gate. Just clips right in there, and it looks absolutely lovely. I'd say lovelier than the Studio Series version. And if you swivel the shield around and bring it out, you get a perfectly functioning shield. Something not a lot of versions are able to do properly. Just that functions. That just works. You've got the shield right out the gate. Would I have liked if it rotated sideways properly? Yes, but on a $15 back then Legends figure, it would probably be $20 today. No, I think it's great. I don't really have any criticisms with this mold. There is so little I can criticize when you consider the size. Really, it's the lack of paint on the chest, but when you consider the budget, that is perfectly fine. It's just brilliant. Now, of course, people are going to look at this figure and say, well, why didn't they just do the same for the Studio Series version? And I feel that's really selling what each version did kind of short. This transformation works amazingly at the scale it's working at. And the same applies to the Studio Series version. Yes, it uses more faux parts, but it also provides an absolutely gorgeous deco and really inventive chest mechanisms. And this leg transformation, it's just brilliant. Simple, but brilliant. There are things I do wish it could have done. For example, the way the sword works, I think this does it better with just the simple clip over the bottom. And the inclusion of the parts-forming shield, I think would have been great on this figure. But this still does really well. In robot mode, I don't think I'd prefer either of them, aside from my general nostalgia for this figure. Take away nostalgia and they're both really good at doing their own thing. I'll never understand a lot of that hate for the Bayverse Studio Series figures. A lot of people just hate the way they transform and the way they look, and the feel of them being different to the 86 and Legacy figures. But I've always found such joy in Bayverse Studio Series. Maybe less so Nightverse and Rise of the Beast and stuff, the ones that came out just after the movie. But no, I've always found joy here. And just because there are certain things I think they should have carried over, doesn't mean I think this is automatically better. But this is still a top tier figure that you should get. And this is still a really good figure that you should also get if you can hunt one down on the aftermarket. They're both great. I can say that because it's true. Anyway, size-wise, he is 8 centimeters by 10 centimeters. Nice and simple. And for size comparisons, here he is next to a standard Legion figure, a standard Core Class figure, a standard Modern Micromaster, a standard Modern Minicon, a not-so-standard LEGO minifigure, and crumbs. I am not a faux parts hater by any means. I have never been. I think it has its place in a lot of Legends figures. A lot of the time, it's the only way to make certain things work. With that said, I do appreciate what this mold does. It's able to so simply and effectively convey the design with minimal transformation steps. It's able to perfectly encapsulate his demeanor and do it amazingly well. They didn't have to cook this hard with this figure, but they did. He's just brilliant. Yes, the old mode could use some more paint, but aside from that, it's peak Legends. And I don't just mean that as nostalgia. In fact, as a kid, I didn't like the toy as much as I do now. It's now that I love this figure. It's now that I love what it does. And for all the delays I've had to unfortunately make in this marathon, I am glad to talk about it. He's pretty good. But tomorrow, we jump from the cheap and cheerful to the expensive and crazy. Once again, we're bending the rules on what constitutes a Legendary episode, and discussing some more cassettes. But these are some that I've wanted to discuss for a while, mostly to tie into the Robot Paradise review, to show what some real cassettes look like. See y'all tomorrow!